Ever wonder what it's like to be an archaeologist? Well, I'll tell you one thing, it has nothing to do with dinosaurs. Hi, I'm Jones and welcome to my channel. If you've never been here before, I'm a busy mom who's also an archaeologist and a vegan. I work full-time as an archaeologist, so occasionally I post videos featuring archaeological adventures and what I eat while I'm working in the field. In this video, I'm going to show you a bit of what it's like to work in archaeology and what I did this year. So if you're into any of that, please hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit the bell so that you get notified every time I post a new video. Let's get into it. This year was actually my first full year working as a professional archaeologist. I've been going to school majoring in anthropology since 2009. I got my bachelor's degree in 2012 and then my master's degree in 2017. That was quite an accomplishment considering that I did it all as a single mom of 2 boys working several part-time jobs. But that aside, this has been a year full of ups and downs for me and a bit of a trial by fire as far as getting my foot in the archaeological door. If you're interested in a career in archaeology, this video will give you a little taste of what it's like to do field work. I'm going to show you some highlights from my year and talk a little bit about the pros and cons of working in CRM archaeology. If you don't know what CRM stands for, it's Cultural Resources Management, and my title right now, my official title, is Cultural Resources Specialist, which really is just a fancy name for an archaeologist, but I guess it kind of encompasses a little bit more than just digging in the ground, which is what most people think archaeologists do. The most common question I get when I tell people that I'm an archaeologist is, what are you digging up? Or what kind of things are you finding? And the second biggest question has something to do with dinosaurs, like what kind of fossils are you finding? Or the person will start to tell me about some new dinosaur find. But I am here to tell you that archaeology has nothing to do with dinosaurs. That's paleontology. Now, paleontologists study things like dinosaurs, ancient creatures, and plants and environments of the deep, deep, deep past before man even existed. Archaeologists study people of the past, how they behaved, what they ate, what their economies were like, what their social systems were like, how they buried their dead, all of those things. And we do that by studying artifacts, or what we call material culture, which is all the things that they left behind. These can include things like buildings, tools, clothing, food remnants, even poop. Yes, poop. I said it. We call them coprolites, which means fossilized dung. I know it sounds like we just kind of look at people's trash, and actually that's a pretty accurate description of what we do. Sometimes the best artifacts are found in ancient trash piles, or what we call middens, and there have been whole archaeological studies done on people's trash. In fact, a lot of the archaeological work I did this summer involved recording trash dumps from mining camps in the late 1800s and early 1900s, high in the mountains of Colorado. This is a part of what we call archaeological survey, which basically involves a crew of 2 or usually more people walking in straight lines or transects in order to cover a large area looking for artifacts. Sometimes they're prehistoric artifacts, sometimes they're historical artifacts, and sometimes they're a combination of both. Just remember that we're not doing this just for fun. We usually conduct an archaeological survey because any government-owned land that is going to be developed or used for some purpose that might change the landscape in some capacity requires an archaeological survey and usually an environmental survey as well, so that any cultural resources or archaeological sites can be recorded and preserved if necessary. We don't usually collect artifacts during a survey. That usually only happens when an actual excavation is conducted and a lot of information is collected on the artifacts before they leave the ground. If you ever find an artifact on the ground, leave it where you found it. When people collect artifacts, even when they just pick it up and move it to another spot, it compromises the archaeological record. That's because it's no longer in its original context, and it makes it difficult for archaeologists to know exactly where it was found and how it was used and in what context it was used, because it's been moved from where it was originally placed. Of course, when things are just laying around on the surface, they can get moved by natural forces such as erosion or animal burrowing or, of course, people. But for instance, if there was a site that was full of arrowheads, or what we like to call projectile points, and someone came along and picked all of them up, collected them all, then no one would ever know that there was even a site there or what had occurred there. Maybe it was an important hunting site, or a place where people lived, or somewhere where someone sat down and made a tool. We won't ever know because all of that evidence is gone. Then, say later on, the person who collected all those arrowheads decides they want to give them to a museum. Well, the museum probably won't even want them because they don't know exactly where they came from or what context that they were in. And that's really important data for people who are researching where things came from and how they were used. At that point, they're just a pretty object that researchers don't have a whole lot of use for. Not to say that they're completely useless, but it makes it a lot harder for a researcher to study an artifact if they don't even know where it came from. It's a complicated area and one that I'm not going to go into depth here. Just remember, leave it where you found it. At the beginning of the year, I was working at Fort Carson, which is here in the Colorado Springs area, but it was winter, so we were in the office working on reports on the monitoring that we had done over the summer. So monitoring sites means we basically go out and look at the sites and make sure that they're all okay, because we're working on a military base and they do a lot of training out there with guns and tanks and things like that, so we need to make sure things aren't getting run over by tanks or shot up or otherwise vandalized. And then we also have to look out for natural causes like erosion and animal burrowing and wildfires. So we're going out and taking pictures of all the significant features, and it's a lot of fun because we're doing a lot of hiking around, and then we get to see all the really cool stuff and take pictures of it. So because I also have a background as an artist, I have an Associate of Art degree, I usually end up doing a lot of illustrations of site maps and artifacts. So I was doing a lot of drawing by hand and also in Adobe Illustrator, which I enjoy doing. But one of the problems with working in CRM is that a lot of the work is contract based. So that means that when a contract is completed, if the company you're working for doesn't have another contract in place, you're out of work. So that's what happened in March. At the end of March, our contract was finished and they didn't have any more work in the area, so I got laid off. But about a month later, I got a call from the company asking me if I wanted to do a contract in the Mojave Desert for a month. And since I wasn't working anywhere else, I said yes. So I actually have 2 videos that I made on my archaeological adventures there. So if you want to check those out, I will leave them in the description box below. One of the things I love about working outdoors in remote places is that we get to see lots of wildlife. A lot of the time it's hard to get any footage of the animals we see because they're often too fast, and by the time I get the camera out, they're gone. But sometimes there's more slow-moving critters, such as a desert tortoise we found hiding in its burrow, big fat horned lizards, and wild burros that wandered freely around Fort Irwin in California where we were working and staying. In Colorado, I see things like a variety of hawks and eagles, pronghorn antelope, deer, elk, coyotes, foxes, porcupines, bighorn sheep, and moose. We even saw llama train in the mountains. And then there's rattlesnakes and red racers, but fortunately I haven't seen too many of those. This summer, up in the Gunnison area, we witnessed an unusual thing. For a period of about 2 weeks, the road that we took to get up to our work area was being used as a cattle run. Basically, these cattle had spent the summer grazing near a reservoir, soaking in the summer sun and fresh air, but when fall came, they were rounded up to get them back on the ranch and safe for winter. So every day, these cattle were wandering freely down the road, on the side of the road, in the middle of the road, and leaving plenty of their own little artifacts behind. I also really love being in nature, and I get to do plenty of that in this job. I get to see some amazing places that not too many people get to see, from high in the mountains to the deserts of California. I particularly loved driving through the mountains of Colorado, where there are lots of Old West mining towns like Leadville. This town had an old-fashioned saloon, an old opera house, and a museum with lots of mining artifacts. I especially love water, particularly a sparkling mountain stream, and there were plenty of those. But it's not always easy. All that walking can be really tough, especially if the terrain is rough or if we have to do a large amount of walking in a day. I feel like Frodo walking through Mordor. Either that or I've been dropped off in hell. And hell consists of walking back and forth through the desert, back and forth for eternity in the heat, over the rocks, over the cacti. There's not that much cacti, actually. We walked 15 miles that day. That's 34,000 steps and blisters on my feet. But I ate well, and always did my yoga every morning before work. There was also the time when I got left behind in the mountains. It was a beautiful place to be stuck, but not when the sun is going down and you have no supplies and no signal on your cell phone. Luckily, I made it home safely, but it certainly shook me up, I can tell you that. It's also not easy always being away from home, but we always get to stay in a comfortable hotel or Airbnb. We stayed in some especially nice ones in Gunnison, Colorado. We had anywhere from 3 to 6 people staying in a house, but it was very comfortable. We had a real kitchen to cook in, and somehow I always ended up with the big bedroom. Look, it's got a little stove, with sort of fake wood-burning stove. And, ooh, a fancy sink. Hello! Oh, look at this. A huge tub with spa jets. Wow. And a nice little view of the creek. Sweet. And over here we have an enormous full-length mirror. Look at that, it's like Gigantor. Later in the fall, I got hired by another company that had gotten a new contract at Fort Carson. None of my previous work buddies were there, but the new crew is really fantastic. They're great people and we make a great team. Some of the field work is on Fort Carson proper, which is close to home, so I don't have to travel so much. But I do like it when we get to go down south to the Pinyon Canyon Maneuver Site, because it's really beautiful down there and there's so many archaeological sites. There's a lot of prehistoric stuff like rock art and rock shelters, where ancient Native Americans lived, made tools, hunted and gathered, and raised their families. There are also lots of old homesteads that hardy and determined people built from local stone and mud. It must have been really difficult for them to live on that land because it can be quite harsh, but it is truly beautiful and magical in its own way. In late summer last year, there were fields of sunflowers that stretched on for miles. It rained quite a bit in the evenings, which leaves the roads really muddy and undrivable, so sometimes we had to drive through the flowers to avoid getting stuck in the mud. Speaking of getting stuck in the mud, we got stuck our very first day out and had to have a fire truck come pull us out of a big muddy hole. How embarrassing. But we made it out and had our lunch at a beautiful high point overlooking Red Rocks Canyon. Since the contract got started so late, winter came on and we're still doing some outdoor field work, but honestly, that's what I love most about my job. I don't mind braving a little bit of cold weather if it means I don't have to be sitting at a desk all day. We also get to see lots of beautiful sunrises and sunsets. So that was my year in archaeology in a nutshell, and I hope you learned a little something about what it's like to work in a real archaeology job. Now, this is not the only type of work that archaeologists do. A lot of archaeologists become professors or museum curators. They might be GIS specialists or lab analysts, or they might end up working in administration. There are lots of different types of jobs out there for people interested in archaeology, but most archaeologists spend at least a couple of years working in the field with boots on the ground. For me, it is the most fun part of archaeology, although one of the most physically demanding, but it really is the reason why I really love my job. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up, and remember to subscribe, hit that bell, and please leave a comment. I would love to hear from you if you have any questions. Are you interested in archaeology? Have you ever thought about becoming an archaeologist? I would love to know. Please leave a comment below. I would love to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.